Welcome to Architects for Change, the podcast that bridges the gap between architecture, the built environment, and politics. I'm Jay Morton, your host. I'm an architect and political geek, and together we'll hear from the change makers and thought leaders who are shaping the future of our cities and spaces. Our conversations will tackle pressing questions that hold the key to our future. How can we achieve a net zero future? What does it truly take to design a better world? And most importantly, how can politics play a pivotal role in breaking down the barriers that hinder progress? Welcome to Architects for Change. Today I'm joined by Labour politician Peter John, who served as Leader of Southwark Council from 2010 to 2020. And part of the reason for wanting to talk to Peter is because during his tenure he oversaw some major regeneration and lots of housing initiatives in Southwark. And this year, in 2026, he was made a life peer, taking the title Baron John of Southwark. But we have already had this conversation and he would like to be called Peter for now.
Yes, please.
Anyway, really lovely to have you on and great to see you again.
Thanks, Joe.
Maybe let's start with a quick bit more information about you, about your journey and your background and how you got into local politics.
Well, I was always interested in politics from a ridiculously young age. My great aunt, who lived in Swansea, was very active in the Labour Party there. So when we went to visit her, I grew up in Weston-super-Mare. When we went to visit her at holidays, her local MPs would be visiting, and she'd be, doing things Labour politicky. And so she kind of gave me the bug, I guess. And so from that interest in politics at that early age, I thought I wanted to be an MP. And if you'd asked me before I became leader of the council, I probably still told you I wanted to be an MP. That was my ambition. And I think I probably saw being a local councillor as a stepping stone along the way to fulfilling that ambition. But when I got involved in local politics, and certainly when I became leader of Southwark Council, I just thought that local government was where it was at. This is where you could really make a difference. You could really affect change, and you could really do things about placemaking and changing what places look like.
Self-confession, I'm actually doing that same journey myself.
Fantastic.
My mum I'm standing to be a councillor in Lewisham, and I think I do see what you mean. You start to feel like, oh yeah, how like the streets operate, how the space between buildings, clean air, how many trees we have, like all the sort of like small things actually make everyone's lives feel much better, and the sort of changes can actually make a big thing as well as the sort of macro level.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of, what politics touches people's lives the most. And I always think it's local politics that does that. National politics might kind of dominate the newspapers and social media and the TV, but what's going on in Downing Street has some trickle down effect eventually on our lives. But in terms of keeping your streets clean, making your places the best places to live, giving you and your kids the best start in life, that's local government.
So then with that, what do you feel under your tenure were the biggest challenges you faced?
Kind of three I would highlight. Firstly, financial challenges, because kind of the day I became leader was at the time that the coalition government was elected and the introduction of austerity. And throughout the 10 years my time as leader, local government was constantly being asked to make really significant savings. So we lost about a third of our funding in real terms over that period of 10 years. So financial challenges. So nobody wants to get elected in order to make cuts. That's not what it's about. So for the fact we're having to do that from day one was a real challenge. And I think the challenge turning it round as to how you make that a positive, the challenge was, well, what can we do? What initiatives can we introduce that will make a difference, even on these limited funds? And one of the values that we had in Southwark was spending every penny as if it was coming from your own pocket, to ensure that we were really spending wisely and wanting to make a difference. So the financial challenges. The borough that I inherited was already going through a degree of change. So we had outstanding kind of deals to be done at the Elephant and Castle, and the rest of the borough, there was interest in the rest of the borough, but we hadn't reached kind of peak buzziness in 2010. So the challenges that came from the physical regeneration of the borough were also massive. And then the third, for any politician, it's making sure that their group behaves and you can do things and you have support of your group. And so group management and just the politics of running a political organization is a third challenge, probably a lesser challenge, but it was still a big challenge there.
Southwark, obviously, we've been talking a lot about redevelopment and trying to manage your local Labour group. We've seen across London and across the country where, even though we've got our own party has this sort of pro-housing development, we are having our own councillors voting down even affordable housing. And so, because I think they can start to they see May and they're listening to the loudest voices. How do we counteract that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was interesting, and it got progressively more challenging over the 10-year period. I think partly in so that people began to take it for granted that you were going to have big development and you were going to have regeneration. And I think the kind of the quantity and scale of it is challenging for residents, and it becomes a political issue as a result of it. But I always try to explain it on the basis that having new development brings massive benefits. And I think we calculated over the 10-year period the amount of money that had come into Southwark through regeneration, through Section 106 agreements, through SIL, through increased council tax, through increased business rates over that 10-year period, was something like £500 million. And that meant that we could do an awful lot that we couldn't have otherwise done. And so initiatives like we introduced in 2010-11 free healthy school meals for all primary school children, way ahead of any national government or kind of London.
You did that. I didn't know about that. Okay.
Yeah, we did that. So all primary school kids had a free healthy school meal. We introduced free swim and gym use for.
That was mentioned on the door yesterday.
There we are in our leisure centres. I mean, that was something that we couldn't have afforded to do had we not had that kind of not bonanza, but that war chest of additional income coming in. So taking advantage of the fact of Southwark's location, the fact that people wanted to invest, did bring political dividends. But as I say, as time progressed, people thought, oh, okay, we can afford to do all those things and we don't have to have the regeneration and the growth at the same time. And that kind of slightly misses the point. And also, I think the attitude towards developers, I think, changed over that decade as well. Whether that was kind of the Corbynisation of the Labour Party, I don't know. But whereas I think people accepted this was a kind of a good thing for the city, people began to get very sceptical about that. And actually, is development, is change necessary for London to continue to thrive?
So what do you think? How do we sort of shift that again? How can you send a sort of public message that if we are generating investment in our borough, that everybody else will reap the dividends, if you like? How can we?
I think it's just keeping telling that story. Yeah, I think just keep telling the story. This is what we can do. London's still an amazing city. It's still a fantastic city, and we love it to bits. But are we feeling as good about London as we were a decade ago? I'm not sure we are. I think we're feeling a bit, it's all a bit difficult. It's all a bit challenging. That reflects kind of the national picture as well. But, London is not doing as well as it was in terms of growth and prosperity as it was a decade ago. And there's a risk, therefore, that London falls behind other competitor cities around the world as a consequence. And I've always thought it's the politician's job, the leader's job, in the city, to tell the story about why these things are good, why a growing economy is good. We've also had successive governments who've been anti-London, let's face it, don't see the benefit of investing in London, whereas I think for the first half of my time as leader, or maybe longer, up until Brexit, if we're truthful, people saw London, investing in London produced great results for the rest of the nation's economy. It's still the case, but that case isn't being heard at the moment.
I see what you mean in that. I definitely feel that as well. It's almost, I was almost going to write a piece about this. It almost feels like we've lost our mojo. And I think actually, like, architecture and placemaking and that sort of national pride, it's almost that being ashamed to actually be seen to be spending any money in a way, because because we are going, everyone is struggling, but actually, do we need to maybe be a bit bolder at sort of both borough level and at, Zadig's level to sort of bring
Yeah,
that pride? And maybe, I mean, I personally, and you might disagree, I think City Hall should come back into the centre.
yeah,
It's not in the right place to just be like,
yeah,
this is where the Mayor of London is, this is our capital city, this is part of the United Kingdom, and we're proud of it.
yeah. You're inviting me to potentially say negative things about the mayor, which I obviously
I
wouldn't
know,
do.
I'm not necessarily saying
But,
anything negative
but
about the
I
Mayor. I
thought it
think
was,
we're all collectively part of that, actually.
yeah, I think it was a bad decision when they moved to what was for the building formerly known as the Crystal
Yeah.
on City Hall, because it felt, and I said this to them at the time, it feels like you're abandoning the city that you're
Yeah.
in charge of, that you kind of, for some reason, you're scurrying away. And I think it's much harder to make the case that City Hall, where it is kind of driving regeneration in Newham. It's not really. It's not
No.
really having that impact or effect. It's just a difficult place to get to, or more difficult place to get to than City Hall was.
Yeah.
And I think that there is, combined with that, if I'm utterly honest, I think Sadiq is not a mayor who is as interested in the built environment and individual kind of regeneration projects as potentially his predecessors were. He's not been as hands-on, and I think that's had an impact, because I think some boroughs have felt that lack of leadership from the centre,
Mm, mm.
which I think has, it's kind of is one of the contributory factors to why London isn't bursting with things. I was going to
Yeah.
say, the kind of the architecture profession. I think people still love architecture. They love the idea of placemaking.
Mhm.
They just don't want anyone to make any money out of it, and and they kind of just want it to happen.
I mean, just put it out there, not many people are making any money out of it.
So I think it's, people have kind of got this schizophrenic attitude to architecture and placemaking at the moment. They want all the benefits. They want to see it happen, but they don't want to see, kind of, as I say, the private sector evil developers making money out of it, and kind of some of the compromises that go with it.
Yeah, yeah, and I see that as well. And I think your point about the mayor not being as interested in the built environment, I think on the sort of our side in the industry, I think we've definitely felt that. But also, I think in a way, like, I suppose my point about the crystal wasn't necessarily trying to be so critical, but it was almost like it was that sort of rhetoric of the time, like the austerity of like, well, let's do the sort of cost saving thing of moving out here, which is the sort of rhetoric that I think was coming both politically and from the public, because we're all in austerity, whereas actually maybe we need to just be a bit I don't know, a bit braver and sort of go against that in a way. But like you say, it's,
I think it would be interesting to see how much money was saved by the move to.
well, exactly, yeah, and
And I mean, it's interesting when you speak to GLA staff. mm, I might be massively exaggerating, but this is certainly my anecdotal experience. Where are they working most of the time? They're working in Union Street, or they're
yeah,
working at the Leicester building. So they're
yeah,
still staying kind of in central London where they can, and they will go to the Crystal when they really have to.
yeah, for questions.
Yeah,
I suppose actually maybe this moves on to, going back to Southwark and when you were leader, and actually the changes in delivery and the sort of different economic models. Because I think, is it right that when you were leader of Southwark Council, there was an ambition to build about 11,000 homes in Southwark, and a lot at the time there was direct delivery with local authorities delivering themselves. I know that we definitely as a practice saw that. And now there seems to have been, I think because of economics, there seems to have been a change to rather than direct delivery, going into partnerships with developers.
yeah.
And some councils themselves are even stepping back. So what do you think of the challenges driving the shift, and is it the right approach, do you think? And is it going to deliver?
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, our ambition to deliver 11,000 was over a 30-year period, so we knew there'd be peaks and troughs over that
Yeah.
30-year period. I was, we laid down the challenge. We said, this is what we're going to do as Southwark. This is the most ambitious program of council house building that anyone's got in the country. And I kept wanting to be trumped by somebody else saying, oh no, we've got a 15,000,
Yeah.
plan to build 15,000 or 20,000 or whatever. And it never happened, really slightly weirdly. So 11,000 remains the most ambitious, I think, of any
Yeah.
individual council across the country. Um, I always thought it would be a bit of a mixed economy in terms of delivery. We were exploring options way back when we started the program, kind of 2013, 14, of, could these be joint ventures? Because trying to, start or revive council house building within a council was quite demanding in any event. We hadn't built council homes for like 40 years. So trying to get the machine working again, what could we do in-house? What were we going to have to contract out, etc. And so I think we're kind of, something's like 3,200 have been delivered under the program so far. So there's still obviously a way to go. But I think, as I say, I always thought there was going to be a kind of a mixed economy answer. The problem at the moment is we've just run out of money. I mean, Southwark, it's reached its borrowing headroom, and council house building, as with the rest of residential building, are facing the same problems in terms of build cost inflation, in terms of additional costs which hadn't been foreseen at the time when we grandly announced some of these plans. And just as I say, kind of the general public sector economics are making it very difficult at the moment. So some of the things that we know about in the private sector hit, of course, the public sector in exactly the same way. It's not cheaper necessarily to build. Actually, it's more expensive in many cases to build council housing than private sector housing. There was one new build block that we built where I made inquiries, and I think we were just a bit above one of the really high-end private sector developer.
Do you know which block it was?
Yeah, I can tell you, but I'm not going to.
Well, I'm just wondering if it was one of us.
I don't think it was Belford thing, but I think it was all bells and whistles. It was fantastic. It was great, and it was kind of part of my. I always used to say my ambition is that you walk through Southwark and you don't know whether that's a council block, whether it's housing association, whether it's a private sector block, because everything is such amazing high quality. And so, you can't have that ambition and then really cut corners, I guess. But yeah.
And it is important for, I think, going back to that pride of place. I think whether you're a passerby or you're the person who lives on that estate or next to that block, I think you want to feel that people care, and it's part of our sort of cultural capital as well, whether it's a social block or a private block. I think it is important, and it does elevate Southwark if you've got good buildings and good architecture.
Absolutely. And you look at some of the really the Guinness blocks and some of the Peabody earliest days, fantastic architecture, and the great courtyards that are being created, really taking pride in it. So that's kind of what I think council housing and good social housing should look like. And also, I don't think we should stick bloody signs all over it which make it absolutely clear that this is council housing.
No ball games.
No ball games. Exactly.
Yeah.
More subtle signage is not a bad thing.
But also, I guess it's then also about the spaces between the buildings, because the whole no ball games thing, it's basically saying you can't be a human in this environment. You can't play, and actually we do need to be better at how we get people out of their homes as well, and like better community spaces. And
and the really good I don't need to tell you this, but I mean the really successful communities that have been built over the last 20 years, they've taken that into account, haven't they? And they've created these fantastic, lively little bits of public realm that people love. I mean, I always thought one of the most successful bits of public realm, not on a residential estate, but was at More London, where you've got the fountains that play just near to City Hall, and families would come there and spend time there, on a sunny day, because their kids love jumping in and out of the fountains. And Lend-Lease then sought to recreate that down at Elephant Park, where families also go and spend time, and kids just having fun in water is a great thing to see.
Yeah, it is true. It is really successful. And also, then you've got the restaurants around the outside, so you can have kids playing, you can have them to eat, and actually, in terms of in Elephant Park, people, not necessarily people who actually live in Elephant Park, also come there, which actually means it is a benefit to the wider community as well.
much
So
more welcoming space than it ever was.
yeah,
That
yeah,
people criticise the Elephant, not so much these days, because I think they're beginning to see this is a great place, and this has been a really successful example of place regeneration. Um, but at the old Haygate estate, you have barrier blocks around the edge.
yeah,
People wouldn't wander into the estate.
yeah,
There were trees, there were green spaces in there, but they weren't used either by
yeah.
residents or anyone else, because people either didn't feel safe or didn't feel welcoming for whatever reason. Whereas now you've got a park in the middle of the housing blocks, which I think is an incredibly successful space.
So with that, maybe it's because I think you've hinted that there was criticism at the time about Elephant Park. Is there anything that you would have done differently, perhaps?
I think just have kept telling the story about why we were doing it. I think we took our foot off the accelerator. We thought we'd made the case.
Yeah,
By kind of 2013, we thought people have bought into this, and we weren't telling the story as frequently and as strongly as we needed to. And suddenly, an alternative narrative took over. That this was, you had 1,000, more than 1,000 council homes here, and now you're only going to have 82 social homes here. And that was. It was never the intention to just recreate the Haygate estate with 1,000 council homes. It was always going to be mixing up the community and creating the same number of social homes, but across a broader area. So you have a more diverse community. And I think we just stopped telling that story. There's an interesting documentary about the rise and fall of council housing, which I think you can still find on YouTube or BBC iPlayer. And it was by a guy who had grown up on the Haygate estate, and it was made in 2011. And he's walking around in a kind of nearly empty block. And he said, this was the great hope in the 1960s of how people would live in the future. But now, it's about to be bulldozed. And he said, there is no one who will mourn its passing. And suddenly there are thousands of people from North London who were mourning its passing, people who read The Guardian, and suddenly kind of took out the course. So I think that's what I'll do differently. Just carry on telling the story. Never assume that an argument's won. And you've got to keep making that argument.
I mean, that's probably good advice for politics in general, actually. If I suppose you've got the strength of conviction, and that's what, and you think, and you've made the case, and you think that that's the right way to go. Like you say, you have to keep making the argument, because once you stop, then the narrative gets filled in by everything else.
Yeah. And of course, there are compromises that you had to make in order for the Elephant to be built. But I think they were worthwhile compromises. And of course, if I believe that, but unless I carry on telling people that, then they're not necessarily going to remember it. People have short-term memories.
Yeah, and I guess as a sort of bit of place, it has like knitted in the wider area as well, so you can sort of go through it, and it sort of has made more connections, and it has an amazing tree house in the middle. Just to write that in there. So, following on from that, in your tenure, what do you think you were most proud of as leader of Southwark Council?
I think it was. I said that my ambition very early on was to ensure that Southwark was felt of as part of central London.
Yeah.
Because there is still a perception, it was south of the river, taxi drivers wouldn't take you across, there, it was just too far away. And so kind of the idea of pulling the concept of central London across the river and south was part of my ambition. And I think we did that. I think people now think, okay, there's still a way to go maybe, but people think the Elephant is a place that they can go to, live, enjoy, spend their leisure time. They think the same of kind of Blackfriars Road, Bermondsey, London Bridge. So you've kind of created, you have begun to pull the concept of central London south. And I think probably because I was really passionate about it, I do think kind of that physical regeneration of Southwark is something I'm most proud of.
And it's going to continue.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, there's still a lot to do. I mean, the Bakerloo line extension will be fantastic if we get that down the Old Camp Road, because that unlocks all sorts of great opportunities, not just for Southwark, but for Lewisham and Bromley beyond. So there's a lot more to do.
That is the one that all of those sites along the Old Kent Road, they are so, part of them are zone 1.
Yeah,
There's zone 1 and zone 2, but still you go down the Old Kent Road and you would think you were like zone 5.
yeah,
So it'd be a huge sways of car parking,
yeah,
huge sites that just need to be developed. And I think the Bakerloo line pausing was one of the worst things, because also all those people who bought those sites to develop them are now
yeah,
sitting on sites that are worth nowhere near as much. And I think this is part of the problem with, housing starts and development across the board. There's been so many like stop start and policy changes that then no one's moving.
yeah,
Because I think we're massively down in London in terms of housing starts.
yeah. I mean, I think it was like 5,800 or something in the last 12
Yeah,
months. It's
we're
just
down
touching
more than,
its target of 88,000,
yeah,
or even, our best year, 45 or 46,000 in recent years. And why are we down that low? We're down because of some of the economic factors I talked about, impact of the building safety regulations,
yeah,
kind of a loss of confidence of investor capital in the capital. And I think that's one thing as well that people don't understand. Money doesn't just kind of magic out of the air and
yeah,
was used to build in London. London still has to make the case for itself and persuade the international investor community that it's worthwhile coming into London and supporting us, so that we can deliver the nice things we want to deliver. We all have
yeah,
great special missions. Certainly, if you're a Labour politician and you want to see more social housing built, etc., but someone's got to pay for it. And how do we reassure the investor community, international investor community, that it's worthwhile doing? I mean, my concern about Old Kent Road is that because of the pause, what I don't want to see is kind of the vision for it compromised,
yeah.
so that it does end up as kind of low level, poor quality housing. I don't think anyone would want to build that, but the economics of it at the moment just are challenging. It's an obvious case that the government should be investing in
It's
the Bakerloo Line
it's
extension.
massive. It's a massive opportunity area.
Somebody
It's
told me like a month or so ago that the BLE, if it was opened, would pay for itself in 5 years through increased fair income. So,
wow.
come on, government, listen to the case,
Yeah,
and you'll get your money back.
yeah, and then that could be the boost that London needs to build their hope. So actually on that, what do you think of the sort of key solutions to sort of push that to get the starts up again? Obviously, Bakerloo would be one. That's quite a few thousand homes along the Old Kent Road. I mean, with the mad thing, Lewisham on its own has got 17,000 homes with planning that are
Yeah,
up.
yeah. Well, I mean, we're up to the limit on the Old Kent Road without the Bakerloo Line extension
Yeah,
of about 10,000 homes consented. The possibility is there for 20,000 homes. Why wouldn't you want that? Why wouldn't you
yeah, yeah,
be supporting that if you were the government wanting to see the economy grow? I think there has to be, how do we make things work again? We have to do some work with the building safety regulator to make sure that that's a much more streamlined process.
yeah,
They're promising that they're turning things around, and it's all going to be 13 weeks as opposed to 8, 9, 10 months or longer. And there are some other tweaks, I think, in terms of just making it affordable to build again. And I think I'm encouraged by what the government and the GLA were trying to do with the accelerator program or emergency program, whatever you want to call it.
yeah,
There are still some criticisms of that from the development sector in terms of the time limiting of the current proposals for 2 years is not long enough, so they can't turn their machinery around and make it work in the way I think the government wants. But that kind of pragmatic approach, if we've got a housing emergency in London, you have to respond to it with emergency measures, and those
yeah.
emergency measures have to remain in place so long as the emergency remains in place.
Yeah, and that's probably going to be still for quite
Yeah,
a
yeah.
while. I think that's the thing, and it needs to go beyond almost political cycles and politics and individual councillors and politicians as well. If there's like a national emergency to deliver these homes.
We're not very good at, I mean, people always used to laugh at, we had a 30-year housing strategy, a 30-year plan for council house building in Southwark. I think, who the hell is this bloke talking about 30 years? But what I was trying to do within the organisation was to get people to look beyond this immediate
Yeah,
4-year cycle. Of course, you can't predict everything that happens in the future, but if you've got an idea of where you want to go, it means the organisation is always going to be kind of focused in that
And
direction.
every decision needs to go back to that agenda plan that's already been written
Yeah,
with the 30-year plan and sort of try and align itself to that. I mean,
exactly.
that sounds like a good strategy. So
Yeah.
that was your time in Southwark. You've got a new job, as we mentioned, or a new role, as we mentioned at the beginning. So now you're in the House of Lords. What are your main priorities while you're there? What are the sort of key objectives?
Well, I mean, I'm gonna carry on flying the flag for Southwark and London, just
Yeah.
because it's kind of in my DNA now. I've got to make sure that I'm not just a one-trick pony, though, and kind of people, oh, he's going to talk about Southwark or London if something stands up. But there's still a case to be made, and when governments of all colours are not being particularly supportive of London, somebody has to carry on making a case. So I'll carry on doing that, and I obviously support local government. And of course, my experience of placemaking, regeneration, housing, and growth, I'll also try and use that where I can,
Yeah.
because I think I've got useful things to say.
So you're going to keep carrying on with the same agenda. So you and Brenda can also keep making the case for the
Exactly.
make
I
a
mean,
new line.
it's fantastic that we did say that we could be Baron and Baroness of Bakerloo, Land Extension, as our titles, but we didn't go with that. But I mean, no, I mean it's absolutely right, and it's great to have someone who is such a good friend from Lewisham, sitting next to me and coming in and experiencing everything at the same time as me.
Actually, I suppose for everyone who's listening, that we're talking about Brenda Dacus, who is the Mayor of Lewisham, who's also gone into the House of Lords at the same time as you.
Baroness
I think.
Lewisham, very proudly.
Yeah, no, I think actually everyone in Lewisham is quite proud. Whenever I mention it on the doorstep, it's like, oh, we've got a new candidate because our mayor's gone into the House of Lords, and they're like, wow, that's amazing. It's so great to have someone from Lewisham in the House of Lords, sort of representing. It is about like representing that local community, and because she's very, very embedded here as well. And likewise, you
Lewisham
were.
born and bred, and so she's absolutely, and she's such a great success story.
Yeah, yeah.
For Lewisham, for her community, for her family. So yeah.
Yeah, rather than what historically the House of Lords used to be like. I mean, what did it feel for you when you first when you had to get it? Is it you still call it a maiden speech?
Yeah, so you have your introduction where you have to march in behind Black Rod and Garter King of Arms, and you have two supporters with you, and that I have to say was slightly overwhelming, because you do feel a real sense of history as you go into the chamber for the first time. And then giving your maiden speech, I defy anyone not to be immensely nervous on both occasions, just because of the history of the place. And I asked my second supplemental question last week, but I still felt nervous doing it. So it will take a while before kind of those edges get knocked off. But it's a great privilege. I do not underestimate for one second the privilege that you have of being in one of our houses of Parliament and being able to have an influence on legislation and how the country goes.
Because that's the prime role in the Lords. It's reviewing legislation, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And do you feel? How do you feel the importance of actually the space itself being that historical building rather than a new building? Do you think that's quite important?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I just think it's such an essential part of our history, and my experience of our nation's history. I think it's really important that we carry on being there. I'm not saying you couldn't do an equally effective job in a new building somewhere else, but why would you want to do that? What's the advantage? I think as long as the House of Lords continues to modernise and try to keep pace with the changes that are going on in our society, and carries on reflecting those changes in our society, I think it still has an important role to play. There are kind of like almost impossible to resist arguments about greater democratization and electing the second chamber. do begin to elect a second chamber, it will want to flex its muscles more than it does currently. So
Yeah.
kind of the House of Commons should be careful what it wishes for in terms of what kind of second revising chamber you want.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I suppose at the moment it's like people have been given that position and there's that pride of that position
Yeah.
rather than going back into electoral. I mean, I
Yeah.
can see both arguments, to be honest.
Oh yeah,
Like in the electoral
you can
cycle.
justify both. But I think if you had an elected second chamber, they definitely would want to flex their muscles more than they
Yeah.
do currently. And of course, then you end up where, in the US, you've got the House of Congress elected every 2 years, Senate elected in thirds every 6 years, and that causes a undoubted tension. And senators are very powerful. Do you want to create a very powerful second chamber potentially in the UK? Yeah. I mean, like you, I can see arguments
Yeah.
for and against, but it would mean if you did create a very powerful second chamber by accident, then that would be a big change to our democracy, where we, for 500 years, the House of Commons have been the powerful seat.
And then maybe you eliminate that, like there is a force that has that longer term thinking. Because in theory, it's like people who are bringing lots of like yourself, lots of experience and knowledge. Not everyone who's been put in the Lords. There's definitely some confusing appointments in the last. I think Boris Johnson.
Yeah, well, there are some on any list, I'm sure, that will raise eyebrows. But I mean, in terms of just the medical profession, you have got kind of half a dozen, I would have thought, really experienced doctors, professors of medicine. You don't have that in the House of Commons. So when you're talking about some really tricky bits of legislation already that I've listened to, then you have really got experts there talking about the subject. I mean, the House is bringing itself, I think, into a bit of disrepute over the assisted dying bill, which I've kind of avoided getting too tied up in because it's halfway through its committee stage when I was appointed. But I think that is an example where the opponents of the bill are not seeking to revise the bill and make it a better piece of legislation. They are simply trying to stop it.
Yeah.
And I think that's an abuse of the kind of the process that the Lords should be adopting.
So in your view, the Lords is about amending and improving legislation because that is the government, because the government is pushing something through which they're elected to do, and the role of the Lords is to use their expertise to make it better.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense.
And of course, you've had things like the social media ban for under 16s was introduced as an amendment in the House of Lords, and so that has gone through. And I think that will have an impact on what the government does during its consultation. Keir Starmer was talking about it yesterday, amongst other things. But so the Lords can kind of help lead the debate on some of these topics as well.
Yeah, and maybe looping back to maybe the government and the Commons, but also the work that you were doing, when you were at Southwark Council in terms of like housing and regeneration. And as we've already talked about, there being a bit of everything's a bit stuck at the moment. What do you think the government could maybe be doing better in terms of house building and regeneration? Otherwise, with how long's a piece of string?
Yeah. I mean, I think the government have done well in terms of having an ambition to build 1.5 million homes. I think that that has been absolutely clear from July 4th, 2024, that was one of the key promises that the new government made. I think what they have to carry on doing is making sure that the policies are in place beneath it, both in terms of planning and everything else, economic policies that support that ambition. And I don't think that's the case at the moment. And as I say, I think the accelerator program for London, the emergency program, whatever you want to call it, is a good start. How can similar measures be deployed across the rest of the country to give the construction industry confidence? And how do we also, because even if you were beginning to deliver your 1.5 million, Jay, you and I will know that we've been having debates the last decade about
20 years
shortages of construction workers that are going to be hitting at any point. So even if you were building 300,000 homes a year, have we got the people in place to build them? What thinking are we doing there? So I think just making it evident to the industry and everyone that this is such a core thing by all of our policies lining up,
Yeah.
from skills, from economic policies, from planning policies, to give confidence to the market.
I mean, I would also add innovation in that,
Yeah.
actual innovation and technology. So, God, I should know who has replaced Peter Kyle, but because he's business now. But when Peter Kyle was innovation and science and technology,
Yeah.
I think that he should have been looking more at construction technology as well. Because I think they're still building in exactly the same way, and there must be something in there in terms of like changing how we're building, making it more sustainable, reducing embodied carbon, different materials, all of those things that aren't pushing fast enough. Like we're still building in the same way that we've been building.
And it's been a real stop-start, hasn't it, on kind of modern methods of construction. Some firms that have entered into that space, but maybe there are one or two still standing. Bob Western Homes have got their factory in near Braintree in Essex, but that's operating very sub-capacity. It could be operating 24 hours a day, churning out kind of really high spec pieces of not prefab, but effectively units that you could build still interesting homes with, and speed up the build process. So yes, I think there's a lot more to be done on modern methods of construction. It's something that we talk about, but there seems to be a kind of a resistance to it, which I don't think is justified these days. And it would speed up the build process so much if we were serious.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is in terms of construction, it's back to the risk level. It's back to the economics that profit margins on building, whether you're a developer, architect, or a contractor, are actually much smaller than they are in other industries. So then any kind of new way of doing things, it's that could take out your margin, or go the other way. So I think there needs to be that sort of investment to sort of push different ways.
I mean, other countries are far ahead of us in terms of MMC, and given that, as I say, we've had the capacity, we've lost some of that capacity because some of the factories have closed already. It seems that the wasted opportunity, and I think we just have to make construction. We've talked about in London for years. How do you make construction an attractive industry from people of all sorts of backgrounds?
I think this is where you need the long pipeline, because it needs to be a resilient sector. Because if it keeps going boom and bust, why would you want to work in it in the first place?
Yeah, and I don't think people realise sometimes, how many opportunities and different doors could be opened from the sector as a whole, from architecture right down to kind of groundworks. There are kind of so many interesting aspects that and careers that people could pursue with skills which would be, in some ways, I'm sure, transferable to other things should the economy require it. But
Definitely. I see we're probably running close to your time, but maybe the last question to ask, obviously there's politically, economically, there's a lot of challenges, but are you optimistic for the future?
Yeah.
Or what makes you optimistic?
Well, because you've got to be optimistic, because the alternative is just too grim. No, I think you just have to be optimistic. And I think at the moment we're going through a period where, as I say, things feel slightly rubbishy. But actually, if you look at some of the economy isn't in recession. We're still growing as an economy.
Teeny bit.
But so the economy is growing. It's just about feeling confident about what we're doing. And I think the narrative for too long has been ruled by the doomsayers and the naysayers and the people who just want to talk our country down. And that I find really depressing. I think we can do a lot better in terms of where our national discourse goes. We're defining ourselves by what we're against rather than what we're for. And I'm somebody who is for growth, who is for the benefits that come from growth, because, as I say, we couldn't have had free healthy school meals for all our primary school kids. We couldn't have had the investment that went into our schools to make them really great places of education and learning. We couldn't have opened new libraries. We couldn't have revitalized our gyms and leisure centres and offered a free use during the week for every resident in the borough, unless we're having that growth and making. My ambition was always to make Southwark the very best place to live and grow up and experience, and we need that as a nation, don't we? And it's not impossible.
Yeah, I think that's a good. It's good to sort of make the connection between the two of like how you can actually generate that growth and then the benefits that come back, because it's almost like we're all in it. If we're all in it together, then actually good things can happen.
Absolutely. And public health benefits, that was one of the keys as well. If people are living in better, housing, in greener streets, they will live healthier, longer lives. And isn't that what we all aspire to?
Definitely. And I think we can leave it there. I think that's a beautiful way to end.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Jay, great to catch up. Good luck on May the 7th.